Hello friends, it's me. This is the first video I'm making after the storm. Technically I worked on some other stuff as well, but we're not talking about that now. Now is the time for Neckbeard stories, because I really want to get back to doing what I was doing before, because I really miss doing this. Anyway, this is from Reddit user Carlexer. This is Enter the Ninjabeard. I'm cross-posting to both Moonhorse and Redx, as they're both purveyors of the finest Neckbeard cringe, and I've been enjoying both of their YouTube channels. Well, thank you. The story is as true as I can make it, given that it took place over 15 years ago, and memory being what it is, fewer minor inaccuracies will most likely slip through. Understandable. I have, however, spoken with a few other people who were there, and our recollections match up pretty well. So I will begin by listing the place and the major characters. The place, Maestro's Salle d'Armes. The current location for where the Maestro is teaching HEMA, Historic European Martial Arts, to all of us. Think of it as a martial arts dojo. Instead of learning things like Kung Fu, Karate, MMA, or the like, you learn things like rapier, longsword, polearm, dagger, stuff like that. The people. Myself, OP, a nerd in his early 30s, overweight with long hair, absolutely loving learning how to sword fight. At this point, I'd been there for about 4 or 5 years, and had a reasonably good sense of what worked, what didn't, and what would just be plain stupid. Maestro, the instructor, he had a wide range of expertise fighting with all sorts of weapons, and when he moved to my metropolitan area, started up a school, mostly so he'd have new friends to fight with on the weekends, which eventually became his full-time job. His method of teaching involved a lot of teaching you how to use the geometry, physics, and biomechanics of a fight to win. Makes sense. Doc, one of Maestro's first students. She's a doctor who first started with the sword fighting to help burn off stress in her particular medical specialization. It's one of the highest paying ones, as well as the most stressful. And of course, Ninjabeard, or NB, our beard of the occasion, who can be summed up in one quote. I learned something much more efficient and deadly when I studied ninjutsu in Japan. Oh, this is going to be fun. As far as looks went, he was actually not bad. A little short, overweight, kind of greasy Italian pickup artist vibe, which did not really endear him to the female members of the class. Lovely. First couple meetings with NB were fine, actually. He had joined the school and already started with the basics, different cuts, guards, parries, footwork, all that good stuff. This is how Maestro always started people. Once you knew the basics well enough to practice them on your own, you could start training with the rest of the class. He constantly shifted people around so that you didn't just work with one person during any class. You could work with different people. We also rotated through helping with basics whenever a new person joined, so I worked with him a little bit. NB picked up the basics without much issue, and after a couple of weeks, he started to work on the rest of the class, which was when the beardness began to show itself. Oh dear. Incident number 1. The first time I worked with him, we were given a sequence to work through. Basically, each of us had a short sequence of motions we're working through that opposed one another, i.e., I make a cut, he parries, countercuts, slip left to avoid and thrust, he slips to rotate to avoid that, and so on. Working at this about half speed, and after doing it more or less correctly once, he decides to make changes. Now, after the first exchange, he suddenly ramps up to full speed and hits me. NB, what the hell? We're working at half speed. That's not part of the drill.
Sorry. After training in ninjutsu for 8 years in Japan, I really can't do my practice slow, and it's not your fault that I'm too fast for you to deal with. Also, the drill motions are stupid and my technique is far superior.
This fucking guy. This was bullshit on so many levels. 1, when learning something new, you always do it slow, and then work up to full speed. 2, he had been working at half speed until he decided to cheap shot me by suddenly switching to full speed. 3, when working at slow speed, you almost never lose control of the speed that you are attacking. Sudden speed shifts generally happen when something is about to hit you, and your reflexes go, I don't want to be hit. So, yeah. 4, his superior technique, only worked because he suddenly decided to move twice as fast as me. Had we both been moving at a similar speed, he would have taken my practice sword square in the face mask. Well, can you at least try to work at the same speed and say in the drill for a little while? I kind of want to make sure I actually have all this down before working on variations.
You haven't mastered it already. You must not be that very good of a student. My ninjutsu training allowed me to master it instantly, but I guess I can slow down if you aren't up to my level.
Internally, I'm saying, alright, motherfucker, it's on. Externally, I say, fine, let's go again. He tried the exact same thing immediately. He sped up mid-technique at the exact same spot, but this time so did I. It wasn't so much that I stabbed him square in the face mask, it was more like he proudly tried to parry my practice sword by slamming into it face first. As his head bounced back, I was thankful for the full fencing mask I was wearing, as I'm sure I had a huge shit-eating grin on my face. As he spurted,
"Oh, you suddenly sped up. That's not what you're supposed to do."
well, since you said you can't practice slowly, I figured I'd do my best to max your speed. Was that a bit too fast for you? I couldn't see his face, but I was sure the face he was making behind his mask would have caused me to crack up laughing.
I can keep up just fine. Let's go.
Over the next minute, he went from trying to cheat me in the drill to plain old flailing about trying to hit me. This wasn't because I'm some master swordsman, but because he was sloppy and predictable. Now, this could have probably lasted for about 10 to 15 more minutes, but Maestro had spotted what was going on and came over. Hey, NB, you understand the drill I gave the class? I can go over it again if you're having questions.
No, my master of ninjutsu allowed me to master that effortlessly. I'm just trying to get OP to learn some of my superior ninjutsu, but he doesn't seem to understand it.
Internally, I'm thinking, bitch, you hit me once with a cheap shot. This is not superior in any way. When Maestro had approached us, we had both turned to face him, leaving me slightly farther away out of Envy's field of view. As he talked, I made a hand gesture indicating that I thought Envy was missing a screw or two. He called for the groups to switch, and I didn't work with him for the rest of the night. After class, I found another loathsome piece of information about him. When he left, he just left his mask and sword on the floor, and he'd taken off. I had picked up his helmet to hang it back. When I flipped over and saw the inside, there was this black streak in the mask that seemed to be composed equally of black hair dye and 30-weight motor oil. I handed the mask over to Maestro so he could take it home and clean it. If you're ever curious about the easiest way to clean a fencing mask, it's simply remove anything detachable and then run it in the dishwasher. I didn't know that. Also, Maestro had asked me what happened when I summarized. He doesn't want to lose, even when he's acting as the bumpkin, so he'll cheap shot you to prove he's superior. Maestro said that he was worried that something like this would happen, and he'd keep a closer eye on him. Incident 2. Apparently, not only did he think he was a master of ninjutsu, but he had to teach everyone his superior techniques. It was annoying enough what he did with me, but apparently whenever he worked with one of the female students, he tried to teach them by plastering himself behind them as the big spoon and trying to move them like he was some kind of puppeteer suit of greasy powered armor. Ew. I didn't see the first few people he tried this with, but when he tried it with Doc, I damn near fell over laughing. The first thing that alerted me that something was up was Doc, sweet, cutesy voice saying, "That doesn't seem right. Why don't we go over what Maestro showed us?" Doc didn't do cutesy. She was the kind of doctor who had to go into surgery and make sure people didn't die while on the table. As I said before, high stress position. She could strip paint with her tone if someone was really stupid, and the only reason she would use such a tone is to lull someone into a trap, and indeed she did. He had already moved behind her to do his big spoon greasy power armor thing, which already looked rather silly, as she was a few inches taller than him, and had longer arms, so he was almost flailing trying to get a hold of her wrist to teach her. Doc continues the cutesy voice, like, "So I still do the basic parry first, right?"
Yes, and then...
And he was suddenly cut off, and Doc did the school's basic parry. This involved a swivel of the hips, pulling the left elbow back sharply right into Envy's gut and leaving him gasping like a caught fish, and I'm pretty sure she really dug that elbow in. He sulked about the rest of the class and left in a huff, hopefully for the last time. But alas, there were 2 more incidents to tell you. Incident 3. A week after the lesson with Doc, I was once again paired with Envy, and he hadn't apparently learned his lesson. So we're working on a close game technique. Simply put, close game is when sword fighting you end up close enough to each other that you can practically wrestle. We cross blades when Envy starts his pontification.
These techniques are so stupid. Anyone who knows anything about sword fighting would never get hurt. They just counter and you'd be on the ground not knowing what happened to you.
I don't think it's that simple, but you know what? Give it a try. He was in a really shitty position. I will try to describe it to you. His right arm was fully extended, sword pointing in the same direction as his arm. It was close to my left shoulder, maybe 8 or 10 inches from his right shoulder. So my hand was covering the point of the elbow. My right hand holding onto the sword, which, with one small push, would bring its point directly in line with his nose. He suddenly spun about, bringing his left elbow up, trying to twist around and elbow me in the face, with all the grace and speed of a land-bound, inebriated elephant seal. A small shift on my part, and the bending of an arm allowed him to ruthlessly assault the point of my elbow with the shoulder blade. I then simply looped that arm around his neck, put him in a chokehold, and balanced him on my thighs so that if he tried anything, I could easily throw him headfirst on the ground. Maestro saw this and came over and asked for an explanation. This time I decided to give an explanation that was much closer to the truth than what NB was probably planning on saying. Well, NB here said that the first position we have after entering that space wouldn't work, and that all it was so easily countered, so I asked to see this counter, which I countered. NB bristled at my explanation and sputtered out,
"It was pure luck on your part. I bet you could do it again. I bet you no one else would be lucky enough to be able to stop my counter."
Maestro, who had been getting fed up with NB, immediately spoke up. Well, if that counter is really that good, I'll need to see it so I can update my own techniques. NB assured us of his own awesomeness, and then took this as a chance to prove it to the instructor. What actually happened was NB tried the same thing he tried on me. Maestro shifted, stopped him, mid-movement, bringing his sword across the throat protection on NB's mask, and proceeded to saw at his neck for a good 15 seconds, as NB flailed around like a drunk who had just peed on an electric cattle fence. Needless to say, NB was rather subdued for the rest of class. Interlude. There's a quick side incident that tells you just how delusional NB was about his martial ability. The next class, after the sawing incident, Maestro was talking about fighting multiple opponents and what tactics are best to use. In summary, you don't fight multiple opponents if you can maneuver until you have one to fight and then take them out quickly. Repositioning to keep the other opponents out of range until you've dealt with the closest one, because fighting 3 people at once, it's stupid. NB immediately questioned the validity and claimed that he could easily defend against multiple opponents, and he would demonstrate. He immediately moved to a clear space and began to fight off multiple opponents. I'm pretty sure he thought that he was throwing out a series of precise and deadly blows that would fend off multiple attacks. He looked like a giant bobblehead with 3 pool noodles glued to it, shaking in random spastic manners. Wow. This was not 8 years of ninjutsu mastery. This was an 8-year-old trying to replicate what he saw at 2 a.m. on a 70s kung fu film. The class was not impressed. The last incident. Free sparring day had come around again, and NB was demanding that he be allowed to spar. After all, his mastery of ninjutsu would allow him to beat anyone who challenged him. Now, normally Maestro didn't let people free spar until they showed a reasonable amount of control and skill in order to help keep down the number of injuries. NB, however, was not having it, so finally Maestro relented and said, "Okay, you can defeat all comers, I'll take you on so I can judge you of all my students and see if you'll be able to keep up with them." Honestly, I don't know how Maestro made this statement with a straight face. Everyone knew he was a spastic idiot, and we were a little surprised that this was being allowed to happen. It wasn't a match, it was a lesson, at NB's expense. Every spastic attack was deconstructed verbally, as Maestro physically countered the Master Ninja. Flaws in footwork, balance, parries, attacks constantly pointed out, as NB was madly flailing to get at least one hit to prove his superiority. The fight finally ended when Maestro decided to end it with a flare. In the end, NB was struck in both arms, locked up, sword useless by Maestro, proceeding to gently hit him in the face with the pommel of his sword repeatedly for 30 seconds. That was the last time I'd ever seen NB, and good riddance. I didn't know so many sword fighting classes actually existed, because this is like the 4th story I've heard about this kind of stuff, but that's kind of fascinating. I guess there really is just an appreciation for that kind of stuff, and it somehow does not surprise me that like a Neckbeard would show up there, because, you know, of course they would. I think it's fascinating. I think it's fascinating that people like this do the things that they do. This whole idea of just like, I already know everything, I'm just a master of this, I know everything, and I'm so good at this, and I know everything. And it's like, so then why are you here? You know? Like, what is the point of you being here if you already know everything? If you have a master of ninjutsu, then what is the point? You know? Like, why did you come to the class? What are you hoping to learn if you're not actually going to put in the effort? You know, you're just here to prove you're good, I guess. And somehow that doesn't surprise me, that, like, narcissism would propel someone like that into a class to prove that they're so much better than everybody else. So, yeah. This guy is kind of a tool. And it's just kind of interesting that there's yet another sword fighting class with yet another Neckbeard who has to learn a lesson the hard way. Anime doesn't make you a better sword fighter, my dude. It's just not how it works. It is so very good to be back, everybody. I'm so happy to be recording again. This was a lot of fun, and I'm going to do a few more before I end my recording session for the day. So, if you enjoyed this, please make sure to like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. I have a Ko-Fi if you'd like to donate to me. I would greatly appreciate it. More now than ever, since the hurricane really kind of screwed up my schedule. And I have a merch store, which, again, if you'd like to buy stuff from there, I would greatly appreciate that more now than ever, since everything kind of messed up by the storm, you know. Either way, if you'd like to check out those things, I would be very happy. I also have my own subreddit if you'd like to send a story so I can read it on here. It doesn't necessarily have to be a Neckbeard story, just any kind of story that you think would be interesting for me to read. r/Moonhorse stories, check it out. Every Saturday, there will be a live stream. There should be one this Saturday, as long as my internet holds out, but I'm not entirely sure. If anything comes up, I'll let you know. But either way, I love you all so very, very much, and I'll see you in the next episode. Goodbye, everybody.